You're listening to the Escape into Gaming podcast with your host, Nathan, aka Kilnieth. Join us as we explore escapism into the various weird and wonderful worlds of video games. Whether it's something immersive and first person, or something deep and strategic, we will be escaping boredom, stress, pain, and pressure with dragons, racing, space, and sneaking. And without further ado, let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of the Escape into Gaming podcast, where we explore and deep dive into escapism within video games. In this week's episode, we'll be getting straight into the focus game this time around, as I'm not entirely sure whether the what we're playing section is particularly interesting, and I also think it's a little weird, because obviously I'm presenting a specific topic on YouTube, for example, and it says the one game, and then the first 15 minutes or so I'm talking about a completely different game. I think that might actually be a little bit confusing. So, without any further waffling, let's talk about the mind game, Prey.
Now it's time to beat the mind game. Now it's time to beat the mind game. And now it's time to beat the mind game. And now it's time to beat the mind game.
2017's Prey, not to be confused with 2006's Prey. Yeah, it's going to get a little bit confusing. You see, in 2006, Human Head Studios created Prey, which was a first-person sci-fi shooter, and it used the Doom 3 engine. It was actually a really good FPS game, and it did some really interesting things with portals. Think, for example, the actual game Portal, but with aliens and guns and variable gravity. You played as a guy called Tommy, who had Cherokee heritage during an alien abduction, who ends up freeing himself from capture by the aliens due to his ability to detach his spirit form from his physical form. And it all got a little bit weird, but you can probably see just from that introduction why it was regarded as a really cool and interesting game. And a sequel to that game was in development hell for a long time, going full on sci-fi with a bounty hunting plot. But unfortunately, the original Prey 2 would actually never come to be, and it did look really quite good actually. And eventually the name Prey would end up being owned by Bethesda, of all studios. So along walks Arkane Studios, having seen great success with their Dishonored series, they wanted to make a more open immersive sim game. Instead of the level-based approach that Dishonored had, they wanted to focus on a single large location that the player could traverse through at will, going back and forth wherever you wanted. And they even went so far to say that if you dropped an item in one end of the map, it should remain there for the rest of the game, unless, some critter comes along and disturbs it. So they decided to depart from the Industrial Revolution and kind of mythical setting that they had with Dishonored, and instead focus on a sci-fi aesthetic, with many developers even going so far as saying that they're essentially making System Shock 3, or a spiritual successor to System Shock, and it really does show. And as Bethesda and Arkane both shared a parent company, that being ZeniMax Media, Bethesda approached Arkane and basically said, "Hey, we've got the rights to this cool name, could you use it please?" And thus, Arkane's new game would come to be called Prey.
Good morning, Morgan. Today is Monday, March 15th, 2032. You have a 9 a.m.
9 years ago, Bethesda published the E3 2016 reveal trailer for Prey, and it presented us with a scene showing a character named Morgan waking up in his apartment. It's Monday, March the 15th, 2032, and he dons his suit and goes over to a mirror to inspect his eye, an eye that is very clearly bloodshot. He then leaves the room and the scene closes.
Good morning, Morgan. Today is Monday, March 15th, 2032.
We're then presented with a scene where a character named Morgan wakes up in his apartment. It's Monday, March 15th, 2032, and he dons his suit and checks out his eye in the mirror, an eye that is clearly very bloodshot. He then leaves the room and the scene closes.
Good morning, Morgan. Today is Monday, March 15th.
Finally, we're presented with a scene where a character named Morgan wakes up. It's Monday, March the 15th. A mug on his desk starts to vibrate, and he heads over to the mirror to examine his eye, which is now very, very bloodshot.
Good morning, Morgan. Looks like we have some tests to run through today.
Good morning, Morgan. You're not going to like what I have to say next.
Then we get some brief exposition about running through some tests. We get a bit of a CG shooter segment, and then an eerie conversation with ourselves before the reveal trailer ends with the title Prey and the year 2017. This trailer absolutely intrigued me. I honestly don't normally pay that much attention to game trailers. A lot of the time, especially with the CG ones and that, I completely switch off. You know, I just want to see what a game plays like, what it looks like in-engine and everything. But admittedly, I have always paid attention to Bethesda ones. After all, you know, I was a big fan of Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls and such, so if I see the name Bethesda, I'm going to pay a bit more attention. So this one actually being published by Bethesda enthralled me. I just really wanted to know more, like, were they making a new RPG? Was it Skyrim in space? Always been a big fan of the sci-fi aesthetic myself, and it seemed like this game might have some kind of clever plot from the whole looking at your eye in the same day over and over again. So I read up on it and discovered that no, it wasn't a new Bethesda game set in space. However, it was an Arkane Studios game in space, and I really enjoyed Dishonored. So there's very few games that I've ever been genuinely hyped for, but for this game, you'd absolutely best believe I was hyped. Later, we would get the official gameplay trailer dropping, showing some actual in-game footage this time around, and once again, we see Morgan's apartment, along with a foreboding voice clip from Morgan himself, and some arguably moody music.
This is Morgan. The year is 2034. I keep having this dream. I'm just staring into the black between the stars. There's something there. I know there is. I can't see it, but it sees me. It sees everything. You know what I'm talking about. Or you will soon. This is Morgan. The year is 2035. Please listen. This isn't a dream. It's a nightmare. There's no room for uncertainty. There's no room for doubt. And know this, there's more at stake than just Talos 1. If what happened here, if even one breaks containment, we're all lost. To make this right, someone has to die.
If I wasn't sold on Prey from just the reveal trailer, the gameplay trailer absolutely sold it for me. We get to see some of the guns in the game, we get to see some of the enemies from the game, and we see the sci-fi aesthetic, and the trailer leaves us with the ominous "to make this right, someone has to die" line before well, it loops around again, with Morgan saying that he keeps having this dream. So we've got this idea of loops going on in every single trailer so far, and I was absolutely hooked. The whole premise and concept resonated with me. Throughout the trailers, we've been having these hints about days looping around, recurring dreams. It was all really, really fascinating to me. And it was an Arkane game set in space. I mean, you cannot convince me that that isn't going to be cool. So the day arrives, the game releases, and I picked it up day one on Steam, and holy heck, I was not disappointed. I mean, first of all, it ran amazingly well. It runs on the Cry engine, like the engine that was made for the Crysis games originally. So it looks pretty darn awesome, and personally, I think it still holds up great to this day. Arkane themselves have got this unique visual style when it comes to the characters. It's almost kind of like painterly. And they've got like exaggerated larger hands and stuff. It's really evident in Dishonored, but it is toned down a little bit in Prey. But yeah, it still looks absolutely fantastic, and surprisingly, the rather mid laptop that I was using at the time could actually run it reasonably well as well. We begin the game in Morgan's apartment, and surprise, surprise, it's Monday, March 15th, 2032. And I just smiled, like, I couldn't help it. I was now living in that trailer that had enthralled me so thoroughly months ago. Like, the fact that the game starts off in the exact same scenario with the line of it being Monday, March 15th, I just couldn't help but grin. The apartment blinds open, and we're presented with this beautiful skyline of a futuristic city on Earth. It's not something dark and dystopian like, say, Cyberpunk. This is a city that's clean, it's bright, it's optimistic and good looking. I didn't know how it was all going to go wrong, only that, you know, of course it's going to go wrong at some point. So you pick up a device called a transcribe. Think of that as like a sci-fi phone, essentially, and you get a call from your brother Alex. He says you're going to shake things up and start to make a difference. So you don your suit and head out into the corridor where a mechanic is working on some pipes. She gives you a bit of a greeting, and you continue on to the helipad to have a executive style flyby to the TranStar offices and begin your first day of work. And this scene, this helicopter scene, is just pure gorgeous. The building beside you has a lad's Bethesda Softworks Presents as the helicopter takes off, and you hear the fantastic music building. At this point, I should probably highlight that, you know how everybody went crazy for the Doom 2016 soundtrack and then the music in Doom Eternal, like how amazing it was? Yeah, well, the music for this game was also done primarily by Mick Gordon. He did the majority of the tracks, including this opening theme. So the helicopter flies over to the TranStar office, giving us a great view of a bridge spanning the water, a bridge that conveniently says an Arkane Studios production. And I remember just smiling again, like these little in-universe diegetic elements just absolutely get me every time. Like when you see the company logos in the actual universe itself, I absolutely adore it. So you arrive at the TranStar offices and disembark the helicopter, and this whole section just kind of feels good. You've got the gorgeous visuals coupled with the awesome soundtrack. Heck, I'd be ready for my first day of work if I had that kind of a start to my morning. So once you head inside and go down an elevator, you meet your brother, Alex, who welcomes you and says you'll be participating in some tests. It's a U family tradition, after all. So once you're ready, you head into the test chamber. And it's this small rectangular room with a button at one end, and it feels very Portal-esque. There's a bunch of scientists at the other end who are eager to see what you can do. Push the button when you're ready, they say. So you push the button and 3 boxes appear, and your job, your highly scientific task to perform, is to move them out of the red circle. So, yeah, okay, is the first thing that came into my mind. I thought, well, maybe it's the game's tutorial, so it makes sense. I'll just, move over, shimmy the boxes out of the circle. And I do so, look up at the scientist and think, right, I've done your little tutorial, what's next? But to my surprise, the scientist seemed a little disappointed. You're then ushered on to the second test room. This time there's a chair at the other end of the room, and the scientist says, I want you to hide in this room. And I'm starting to scratch my head a little bit. Like, I'm thinking maybe this is the stealth tutorial, but, the only object in here is an office chair. Like, I know Arkane, they've made Dishonored, surely it's not sloppy enough that you can hide behind an office chair without sticking out like a sore thumb. But since it's my only option, I crouch behind the chair and wait for the test to end. Again, the scientists seem to be disappointed in my efforts, and I'm starting to doubt myself at this point too. I'm like, is there a different way that I'm supposed to be doing this test? So they then shimmy you along to the next test, and there's a waist-high wall, so obviously it's the jumping tutorial, I think. Once again, we're instructed to push the button and make our way to the other side in whatever way feels most natural. Okay. I mean, I can't think of many more ways to get over a waist-high obstacle in a first-person game other than moving forwards and pushing the jump button, so I do exactly that. And the scientist then remarks saying, is this some kind of joke? With another one saying, well, I installed what was brought down. And I'm just sat there like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm really getting quite confused as to what's going on now. The fourth and final test is an interactive one with a touchscreen computer. And I'm just going to pause right here to mention one thing. Like, Prey's computers and interfaces are amazing. I really adored the screens and computers in Doom 3, the fact that you just moved your cursor over them and it would control the cursor in the actual computer itself, and you press the shoot button to click. And in Prey, they just take it to a whole other level. It's another one of those diegetic elements that I really, really enjoy. Like, you can just look at these screens and interact with them as long as you're close enough. It's just such a fluid and nice feeling system. Anyway, we're given a few psychiatry-style questions on this computer. We get the trolley question, there's a train coming down the tracks with 5 people on it. Do you want to switch tracks and that kind of stuff? And then at the end, we get what feels like a bit of an homage to Fallout New Vegas, where we're looking at one of those weird, black patterns on a white screen. But there's a bit of confusion when the screen comes up, because it looked like something moved. And then a mug on the scientist's desk transforms into this black, inky, 4-legged creature and quickly asphyxiates him. There's a bunch of screaming, panic, and then the room that we're in is gassed. So we wake up. It's Monday, March 15th, 2032. We're in our room, but something's wrong. Now, if this doesn't sell you on the game and get you to immediately go out and try it, I really don't know what will. I'm deliberately going to stop here for a moment just to say that if you have any interest in playing this game at all and you haven't played it, please go and do so. It is available everywhere. It quite often goes on sale, and if you're as intrigued as I was, you will thoroughly enjoy the game. I'm going to skip a little bit here, just because the whole next part of the game is a huge, mind-bending series of reveals and twists that, honestly, I thought they were so super clever. But suffice it to say that those creatures that we saw in the test chamber, they got out, and we've now got a voice calling us on the transcribe, telling us that we need to get out. We're introduced to mimics in this opening segment, those 4-legged black inky creatures that we saw kill that scientist, and they're able to quite literally mimic any object in the game. They'll turn it to chairs, mugs and cups, trash bins, even items you'd normally rush over to pick up, like, pistols and ammo and stuff. So initially, you're going to have no idea what could be a mimic, and armed only with a wrench, you're probably going to start running around bashing everything just to make sure that it's not going to jump at you. And it's this uncertainty that I think is Prey's fear factor. I don't think it's a terribly horrific game, like it's not a full-on horror game, but it does have a crazy amount of like cosmic horror as the plot develops. But I personally wouldn't say it's too scary, it's just surprising more than anything else. In fact, that's probably the most important thing about Prey. Like everything in the game, it comes as a surprise. It's all hinging on surprises. You've got the mimics, you've got the technology, the way the universe differs from our own, even down to the plot. Like, you know, the whole JF Kennedy stuff and the different human history that this game has. Every element is filled with surprise. So eventually we'll find ourselves in the Neuromod division, where we'll get our first ranged weapon, a glue cannon. Yes, the the actual first ranged weapon we get as hands on actually deals no damage. However, what it does do instead is encase enemies in this like rapidly hardening glue like stuff that essentially freezes them in place. It is perfect for a good 1-2 punch, as Atlas in the Bioshock series would put it. You can freeze your enemies and then give them a whack with your wrench. What's really incredibly clever about the glue cannon, though, is that you can actually use it in the world itself for traversal. So you can fire globs of the substance at walls, and it'll make like, you know, blobs of it leading up the wall. So you can essentially create staircases to get to higher areas, and later on you can even use it to put out electrical boxes that are shooting electricity, and you can also use it to put out fires as well. So what can't the glue gun do? In the Neuromod division, we will also find our first Neuromod. This is Prey's progression system, essentially, which allows us to unlock a huge variety of upgrades. You've got your typical, you know, health, stamina, carry capacity, and like hacking abilities and stuff like that, all the way up to unique powers that are called Typhon abilities. And these are actually from the creatures themselves, and yes, this even includes the Mimic's ability to mimic other objects, so you can absolutely live out your rolling around at the speed of mug fantasies. Which actually, it has more practical gameplay elements than you'd probably expect. But why in this sciencey sci-fi facility do these neuromods allow us to get abilities from the creatures themselves? Well, that's all something that's going to be revealed later on. Once we leave the Neuromod division, we enter the lobby area of the Talos 1 space station. Because yes, it turns out we weren't ever in our apartment, and we definitely weren't on Earth. We're on a space station orbiting somewhere between Earth and the Moon, and wow, if the opening visuals didn't do it for you, the lobby for the Talos 1 station certainly should. It is absolutely beautiful. It's got this kind of Art Deco or Art Nouveau kind of appeal to it. You've got a sci-fi aesthetic everywhere, but you've got the kind of fancy bits like red-stained wooden stairs and golden railings and huge golden winged statues adorning the lobby. And you've also got a large glass window to see out into the black of space, where you can see the moon and the sun and everything. I think at the time, a lot of people thought that it was just kind of copying Bioshock or System Shock for its visual style, but it's more of a perfect mashup of both of those games, really, and I think it also carries a very clear identity of its own. During the course of the game, you'll come to know the various areas of the Talon 1 space station, each of which has their own distinct aesthetic. So you've got the corporate offices, you've got a lavish green biodome essentially, you've got the Guts maintenance tunnel that runs through the entire station filled with cargo and supplies, and of course you've got the laboratories and science facilities themselves. Each area you'll likely become very familiar with, especially when scavenging for supplies to keep yourself alive. And yeah, it's not quite a survival game, but I would say the early part of the game does fit into the survival horror tropes where you're often going to find yourself low on ammo or rushing to find any more bullets you can find, all the while holding your breath and hoping that those bullets that you've just spotted are not a mimic. But yes, you will make your way to Morgan U, aka your office, where you'll be greeted with a looking glass message from yourself. And this looking glass tech absolutely fascinates me. It's like the portals in Portal, even potentially harkening back to the original Prey's portals, where looking through them you can see a fully 3D rendition of another environment. Even if you decide to take your wrench and smash the glass itself and shatter off a segment, it'll carry on playing, and the whole environment is contained only to the connected pieces of glass itself. It's really fascinating. I don't know quite how it's been achieved on a technical level. It's probably something to do about having a camera in the environment and then setting the texture of the glass to the view from the camera or something, but it's very impressive looking. Partway through this message, just when you are about to tell yourself something important, which sounds weirder than it is, the looking glass server actually gets disconnected and your brother Alex contacts you asking you to just stay put while he sorts something out. At this point you're probably questioning your brother as well, like, how is he involved with what's going on here? Why did he cut off the looking glass server? So you'll be pointed in the direction of the hardware labs to reset the server connection. I should point out that the whole looking glass element is also something that makes me smile quite a lot, because the creators of the original Thief games and System Shock were Looking Glass Studios, so it's a very clear nod to the heritage that this game stems from. And it's this part of the game where you're clearly beyond the initial tutorial and the areas you'll be exploring really do start to open up. Prey doesn't really have traditional levels like, a first-person shooter or something. Instead, like Arkane wanted to do, the entire station itself is one gigantic structure with different sections set aside for varying purposes. And as soon as you set foot in the hardware labs, you're presented with choices immediately. Which way do you want to go? You start off in the lobby, which is a square room with a second floor above you, so do you immediately try to climb up there, bypassing the first floor entirely by using your glue cannon to make some stairs? Or you can head through the main entrance, which is presented with a security gate in front of you and a sign showing that to the left is the way to the demonstration theatre. Looking to the right, there's also a locker with a turret inside it, just teasing you with the promise of making your life easier if you can get in and get that turret. And the choice is really completely down to the player. In every single area of Talos 1, you have the opportunity to approach things in your own way, and depending on what neuromods and abilities you have, or even what weapons and tools you've got available, your approach to every single area can change drastically from playthrough to playthrough. I think Prey is probably one of my most replayed games, along with the Deus Ex games. Whereas in traditional open-world RPG and adventure games like Skyrim or Breath of the Wild, for example, it's really easy to fall into kind of familiar rhythms and end up with characters approaching things the way that you always do. Like, once you've realised the optimal path, you're kind of gonna keep going towards it, but Prey offers such a variety of approaches that unless you go out of your way to do the same thing every time, each playthrough is going to be pretty different to others. I mean, even the achievements for the game as well, like for those of you who like hunting them, the achievements require multiple playthroughs to achieve. One even requires you to try and play with no neuromods installed whatsoever, which drastically alters the options that you've got available to you. So whilst the player's kind of deciding on the approach to the hardware labs, you're probably also going to learn two very useful mechanics. One is the new enemies that you can look at that say ? Corrupted, Those are hostile operators, and you're probably going to figure out they don't take too much damage from your pistol. But if you fire a few globs of glue at them and then proceed to whack the heck out of them with your wrench, that's quite an effective strategy to quickly taking them down. Secondly, you're probably wondering why the lights keep flickering. So, going back to that first discovery, enemies in the game have various strengths and weaknesses. Unlike Deus Ex, which mainly boiled down to organics versus robots, some enemies in Prey are weak to conventional weapons, and some might be weak to elemental damage like fire or electricity, and others are also only weak to psychic attacks from like the Typhon Neuro mods that you can install. So you'll discover which enemies you'd rather avoid or approach differently depending on the circumstances, and quite often you're going to have means of dealing with the enemies in the environment itself, such as ways to cause electrical hazards, or lots of areas have these red oxygen pipes running along the walls that you can shoot to burst and cause jets of flames to shoot out. And even more impressively, like when you're attempting to avoid these environmental hazards yourself, this is another area where the glue cannon shows its utility as well, because if you've shot holes in a load of pipes that are now spewing flames everywhere, you can just shoot a glob of glue at the burst and poof, instant fix. So the tools you have access to in the environments themselves become almost a strategic playground, and I'd say almost to the same extent as the Larian games like Divinity Original Sin. It's super impressive, like all contained within the wrappings of a space station that makes sense. Of course there's these oxygen pipes running throughout it, they need to pump oxygen everywhere. The station feels lived in, the departments make sense, so yeah, of course they've got these pipes and these electrical boxes everywhere. It's just what you would have in a space station, really. But yeah, back to the second discovery, the flickering lights. What's that all about? Well, if you didn't meet them in the main Talos 1 lobby earlier, you are about to meet pretty much the kind of standard enemy in Prey, which are the Phantoms. Whilst the mimics are more plentiful, eventually mimics become more of an annoyance than anything else. They're kind of akin to the head crabs from Half-Life. But Phantoms, and later on their more deadly forms, will become the main enemies you'll be dealing with in your adventure throughout Talos 1. And Phantoms have this unique presence about them, and you're always going to be relatively aware of when Phantoms are nearby. For one thing, they cause some form of electromagnetic interference, which is what causes the lights to flicker and nearby screens to start glitching out. Initially, it feels like it's falling perfectly into some form of horror trope, adding to the unsettling atmosphere, but eventually you start to kind of get a feel for exactly where a phantom might be, based on what lights are flickering where and if the path of disruption is moving. Phantoms also make a variety of noises, from vague and distinctive whispers as they patrol around the station, to an odd, what I can only really describe as like a stretching sound as their tendrils extend out of them, as if they try to like sniff the air or sense something. If you're playing with subtitles on, you're also probably going to be pretty confused, as it's going to actually translate the whispers that the Phantoms make into English, which is odd. But there is actually a hidden mechanic where the more Typhon Neuro mods you install as a player, the more clear the Phantom's whispers become, so you will actually start hearing them in the game world. And the things they say sound like they're either parroting words they've heard, or perhaps they're speaking memories of the past from the host that spawned them or something. It's they'll say things like, what does it look like, the shape in the glass, and is that something we created in a lab? All very, very spooky. I'll come back to the idea of hosts and spawning them later, but for now we progress further into the hardware labs. If you head towards the demonstration theatre, you'll be treated to an in-environment cutscene, just like the ones from Half-Life, where you've still got full control of your characters, but your eyes are drawn to what's happening in the next room over, and you are separated by some kind of force field, so you can't, interact with the scene unfolding. But yeah, you see a phantom approaching a survivor who promptly glues the phantom solid and then climbs up a glue staircase is made to reach an upper area, clearly kind of hinting to the player that this is an option if it's not something that you were previously aware of. But unfortunately for our survivor, the phantom eventually breaks free from its encasement and promptly finishes the survivor off with a kinetic blast. Just to make things a little more shocking, however, the phantom then kind of shifts its way over to the force field to look directly at you, just kind of staring straight at you as if trying to work out whether it can reach you or something else. Making things even stranger is that this phantom isn't just called Phantom or something, it's actually got a human name, Clive Lawrence. Was or is this phantom actually Clive Lawrence? What happened to him, and why does this one have a name? When you kill one of these named phantoms, you will often find personal effects on their bodies, and later on, when we head into the director of the hardware lab's office where there's another named phantom, January, the operator who's speaking to you, will actually say, "I think that's the director of the lab." If you explore around a little bit in the room where Clive was found, we will also find his first chipset down here, and these are like upgrades that you can slot into your suit, providing various benefits. Kind of another upgrade path, essentially. They're kind of similar to the to perk points in other games or bone charms in Dishonored. And if we head back to the main area of the hardware labs, either by traversing through a nearby vent or by getting an access card for the doors, we'll have to face the first phantom of our own. And if you take a little hint from that survivor who just glued the previous one up, gluing them and proceeding to lay into it with your wrench is a pretty effective strategy. Or, of course, you can simply strafe around and unload your pistol into it, but the little silenced pistol you have, you'll discover, is more for mimics and utility than anything else. To one side of the hardware lab, we can find the ballistics lab, which leads us to a potentially game-changing discovery, the recycler charges. In this room, there's a large spherical chamber with a mimic trapped inside of it, trying its best to get out. And if we head over to the nearby computer, we can see that there are notes referring to the recycler charges and a very tempting button there saying deploy charge. And if you press that button, you'll see a pulse of energy in the spherical chamber, followed by this glorious clattering of materials, because the mimic that was previously in there has now been converted into its constituent parts. We've quite literally recycled an enemy. And this opens up some huge gameplay implications. Firstly, we've got a new weapon that we can use against his enemies, literally recycling them down into their base components. But secondly, like many immersive sim games, there's a ton of random objects filling out the levels and maps, like chairs, bins, boxes, etc. All of those can now be recycled for resources as well. And if you're anything like me in this room, you're now probably going to proceed to stuff everything in the room into the recycling chamber. And the best part is, it'll work. After a satisfying flash, all of the objects that you crammed in there will clatter to the floor as metal, organics, and all the other base materials you can now gather up. Another implication of the recycler charges, these things kind of work like grenades, so they're portable versions of these recyclers. Another use for them is that if you're at a point where an obstacle is in your path and maybe you don't have the strength skill to be able to lift it, you can just slap a recycler charge on it and boom, problem solved, and you get some free materials to boot. It actually kind of hints at this in a way in the room that you're in, because there's a safe in one side, but you don't have the code to it, and unless you've got the hacking skill, you're not going to be getting in. But at the other end of the room, there's a sticky note hid between a metal grill and a bunch of boxes. So if you're not strong enough to lift them up, just slap a recycling charge on them, and boom, you've recycled a lot of them, and you've got access to the sticky note that has the code on it. So another weapon that can essentially be used as a tool for problem solving. Speaking of the recycling, throughout the station there's also 2 devices that play into this system. You might have already seen them earlier in Morgan's office. There's a kind of standalone recycler device which you can put any of the junk items that you might have collected inside, and it'll break them down into components. And normally, quite close to these recyclers, you can also find a fabricator. So the fabricator takes the materials you've collected and it allows you to produce any fabricator plan that you've discovered. So you can make things like ammo, grenades, weapons, or later on even neuromods if you collect enough alien material from the Typhon. If you do unlock neuromods and decide to go whole hog and produce a bunch of them, because why wouldn't you? Eventually you do actually get locked out of the ability to make neuromods, and you'll be presented with a new side quest to bypass the lockout, which you'll have to do later. And it's a really cool way of like limiting the player's power level at this point in the game, but it's all done with like an in-universe explanation. Like, of course, there are limits on how many neuromods people on the station can produce without, going to the main master server and removing the lockdown on them. So, I've always really enjoyed that about that aspect. You can make yourself quite powerful, but not too powerful, not yet. For now, though, back in the hardware labs, we still need to find the Looking Glass server to see the rest of the message from Morgan's office. But once we approach Dr. Calvino's office, we'll find that it's locked, and it's not a keypad that we can hack. We actually need a keycard this time. So this is where the game introduces another set of mechanics. Each area on the station generally contains a security station or checkpoint, and inside these are computers where the tracking bracelet for each member of staff can actually be tracked on your heads-up display. So this goes for everyone on the station. I think if memory serves, there's also an achievement for tracking down every single staff member on Talos 1. So once we track Calvino's tracking bracelet, just in one of the rooms off of the second floor, we head up there, and he's floating. That room is open to vacuum and space. Not going to be as simple as we thought. We are going to have to get a propulsion system and participate in our very first spacewalk. At the time that this game was released, I was thoroughly engrossed in all things sci-fi and space. I'd been playing Elite Dangerous, where you were confined to the inside of your ship. I remember buying an indie game called Rogue System to try and experience some zero-G manoeuvring and the kind of dream of being able to be both inside and outside your ship. Heck, I think I'd probably been playing Kerbal Space Program for quite a while, which was the closest I'd gotten to the true feeling of extravehicular activity in a space game. So this game, Prey, was about to scratch an itch that I'd had for so long, and it does it wonderfully. Exiting the airlock after donning the propulsion system, you're immediately hit firstly by the visual changes, because you've got like a helmet that's been automatically deployed over your face, plus an oxygen meter, which is infinite unless you're playing in survival mode and you've got a damaged suit, but otherwise it's infinite, so don't stress about that. But then you've also got the audio changes as well. Everything's muffled, sound is completely dampened while out in space. I actually recorded the in-game audio at this point, so take a listen to this and just let it kind of wash over you. You can hear Morgan's breathing, you can hear the whoosh of the propulsion jets as you take in the sights of the exterior Talos 1, and another Mick Gordon soundtrack builds up. Spacewalking in Prey is both intuitive and daunting. I think it was around this time that many people had complained about like spacewalking in games. I can't quite remember where I'd heard it or which game it was for, but on some other games like in the Steam forums and stuff, people just didn't like the controls because, you know, in space, if you push off in a direction, you're going to just keep moving in that direction. If you start to spin, you're just going to keep spinning. It might have been something to do with Elite Dangerous, actually, because in that game you can turn flight assist off and people say that it's impossible to control. Prey itself adopts a semi-Newtonian movement scheme whilst in space. If you thrust into a direction, you will keep moving that way. However, they have kind of sensibly decided that if you roll, you're not going to end up in a completely unmanageable and possibly sickness-inducing spin. So if you do rotate, you will come to a stop as soon as you let go of the button. So that's nice. And non-Newtonianly, they've made it so that your speed is limited unless you activate the boost, which will move you along at pace, but even then it starts to gradually slow you down back to the regular kind of top speed. And then you've got a saving grace as well. If you hold both of the rotation buttons at the same time, it will cause you to come to a complete stop. So in my mind, Prey has the perfect zero gravity movement speed for a game that isn't going for full-on realism. It's the kind of perfect balance between feeling like you're spacewalking, but not with the inherent risks that come with being unable to stop yourself moving, essentially. And, you know, this opening section, you've got the kind of perfect playground to experiment with this new movement system. There's no enemies out here initially, though don't delve too far, because they will be. But yeah, there's a few human corpse markers kind of teasing you with the promise of more loot and discoveries. And these actually conveniently update to say found once you've located and looted them, so it's really worthwhile taking this opportunity to explore around a little and get used to the zero-G movement controls. Once we grab the keycard from Calvino's body and head back into Talos 1, we can now unlock his office, where we will be able to restore the server connection for the looking glass screens. And whilst we're in this office, you can also look at some of the screens in the middle, in the office itself, which one of the scenes will actually show you a way to access a secret hatch. But the way that the looking glass monitors are set up really kind of highlights how visually impressive this technology is, as they essentially give you like a window into the past when you're watching these recordings, and you can walk around all three screens and view it from any angle. I strongly suspect that this mechanic would lead to the time travel section that occurs in Dishonored 2, especially the ability to peek into the past using the device that you get in that game. But yeah, connection restored, loot gained, we can now backtrack to Morgan's office and seek out the rest of that message. But as we return to the Talos 1 lobby and head into the conference room, you'll quickly learn that in Prey, areas that you've previously explored or even cleared out will begin to change as you make progress through the game. In this particular instance, the conference room that you passed through earlier to get to the hardware labs now contains a new type of phantom with purple smoke and kind of a spikier appearance. Honestly, like when I've been replaying the game for this write-up and this episode, I can't remember it being as much of a challenge as it was this time. But yeah, these etheric phantoms will actually break out of glue and duplicate themselves, so glue becomes a pretty poor tactic to deal with them. So in my particular playthrough, where I'm not using any neuromods for that achievement, I decided that sneaking past and locking the door behind me was the best strategy, and it's a perfectly valid strategy. The game lets you do it. So yes, we head into our office and activate the second half of the message from Morgan.
You're not gonna like what I have to say next. You have to destroy Talos 1. The research, the Typhon, nothing can survive. Including you. I know how it sounds, but you've seen what those creatures can do. They're a part of you now.
If even one cell gets back to Earth, we're lost. I'm sorry. I wish there was another way. January can walk you through activating the self-destruct mechanism. Alex will try to stop you. He's allergic to failure. Too proud to go back to Mom and Dad with his tail between his legs. So it's up to you now. Good luck. Told you wouldn't like it.
Well, he or you weren't wrong. You're not going to like what he says. So it seems that our task is to blow up the entire station, ourselves included. And as we're puzzling over that, the music builds into a crescendo and the operator dispenser whirs to life.
Hello, Morgan. I'm January 2035. I'm an operator. There are many operators aboard Talos 1, but none of them are like me. I'm your plan B. My first task was to free you from the simulation. The second task was to make sure you saw your video. Those are done. Interesting. New directives are now available to me. The self-destruct protocol for Talos 1 is activated by 2 arming keys. Your brother has the first. You had the second. Alex destroyed your arming key, but you hit a fabrication plan for a new one in deep storage. That's where you need to go next. We can worry about getting Alex's key afterwards. The Typhon are spreading fast, Morgan. You'll be racing against them. And your brother. This key card will grant you access to the main lift and all the labs. The main lift is the fastest way to reach deep storage.
So January presents us with a general access keycard, some additional neuromods, and hints to us that the security station in the lobby, which we now have access to, might have weapons, which will no doubt come in handy as the threats on the station increase. And at this point, if you press January for some more information, like keep talking to him, he will also explain that Simmons installed some blank neuromods on you, which is why you were able to remember the previous day and escape from the simulation at the very start of the game. Because normally, if you uninstall a neuromod, it resets the user's memories to before the neuromod was installed. So we're kind of starting to understand why Morgan was repeating the same day over and over and over again. It's because he was testing out these neuromods, and every time they uninstalled one, his memory reset to March 15th. So that's where the looping comes in. But yes, armed with our new general access keycard, we have access to a variety of new locations in the Talos 1 lobby, one of which is the medical centre. In there's a couple more Typhon to deal with, but it's definitely worth going in there because one thing Prey does really well is that whilst you've often got the survival horror kind of aspect of low ammo, low medkits, etc., just like System Shock and Deus Ex before it, there are ways to more easily heal and recover without using any of the limited resources. So inside the medical bay, unsurprisingly, there is a medical operator dispenser which will print out a new medical operator that you can speak to, and it will instantly heal you to 100% health. And throughout the game, really, you're going to start keeping an eye out for these things because engineering operators will repair your suit integrity to 100%, and science operators will refill your psi or power meter to 100% as well. And if we continue to explore around this medical sector, in the quarantine bay we will meet Trevor Young speaking to himself with a label saying mind controlled. And if we examine some terminals in here, we can find that he wandered into an experiment without wearing something called a psychoscope, and in quotation marks ended up controlled by them as a result. So the plot certainly thickens. With every single log that you read and note and email and the audio logs, more and more questions are being added to the ever-growing list of just what the heck is going on in this game and this station. On top of that, if we head into the counsellor's office, we can find a repeat of the test we took at the start of the game, along with some audio recordings of some sessions various staff members have had with the counsellor.
Tell me about the dream. Did dream. Yes, it's always in my lab, and I'm standing in front of the glass.
Are you alone?
Yes.
What do you see in the glass?
Nothing. At first. I don't want to turn it on, but I can't help it. I have to turn it on. When I do, it's like the heart of a black hole, an immense darkness. There's something swimming in the black. I catch glimpses, edges of the shape. I feel as though it wants to come through onto my side. I have to turn off the glass before it sees me, but I always wake before I can.
What does it look like? The shape in the glass?
Nothing.
Does it look like this image here? Dr. Calvino, does it look like this?
No, that's... No, I don't...
Are you sure?
Where did you get that drawing? Have you been spying on me? I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Interestingly, some of the quotes that we hear from Matthias Cole, the counsellor, include, "What do you see in the glass?" and "What does it look like, the shape in the glass?" Two quotes that we can also hear from the Typhon that wander the station as well, the Phantoms. Anyway, continuing on with our main quest, we head to the main elevator in the centre of the lobby, and it's stuck on the Arboretum level. January chips in and says it's providing a different diagnostic code each time that he makes a request, so we're going to have to go the long way around instead, via a route in Psychotronics. And as soon as we head into the access corridor for Psychotronics, we get a new transmission from December. This is another contact using your voice, or Morgan Yu's voice. This time, however, he says your instructions weren't to blow Talos up, but they were to escape Talos 1. So who the heck is December? As we set foot in the Psychotronics department, we're immediately hit with a scenery change and an atmosphere change as well, as another one of Mick Gordon's masterful tracks builds in a sense of suspense and general unease. This is a track that's unfortunately missing from the purchasable OST for the game, which I think is just unfortunate. There's actually quite a lot of music in the game that isn't in the OST, and each track is fantastic in its own way. But yeah, alongside a more utilitarian appearance to this department and the unsettling music, we'll be introduced to a few new enemies in this department that ramp up the threat that the player faces. And immediately upon walking forwards, we're given our first jump scare. Although it's not your typical scare, it's a musical stab as an electrical box nearby explodes and shoots arcs of electricity along the floor. Okay, game, I see what you're doing. Alex will contact us saying that the Psychotronics department is the opposite of safe, and if you've read any emails and logs up to this point, you'll likely know that this is where the Typhon outbreak originated, and Alex insinuates that you're being helped and he's actually wondering who is guiding you through Talos. Further inside, a nearby security booth teases with promises of more ammo and supplies, as well as a couple of auto turrets, and I absolutely love this security booth in particular. You don't know the code to access it, and unless you've invested in the hacking skill, you are not getting in. That is, unless you've brought with you the useless weapon, the Huntress Boltcaster. See, through the window of the security booth, you can see a computer in there, and if you fire the boltcaster at the screen, the bolts actually trigger the touchscreen. So a couple of shots on utilities, followed by a shot on unlock door, and you're now free to loot the booth to your heart's content. And it's made even more amazing by the squeaky noises the bolts make as they ricochet off the screen, kind of like a dog's chew toy. It's just such a fun and amazingly unique way of solving problems. Crossing through the bathrooms, which are of course crawling with mimics, because what bathroom in these kind of games is ever safe, we can see a sign saying Psychoscope mandatory beyond this point, and the door is not going to let us through. And if we met the mind control Trevor earlier, we definitely don't want to be wandering around and ending up like him. But what is a Psychoscope? Well, if we head into the adjacent bathroom, we'll find a great big hole in the floor and a room that's been absolutely caked in glue. Clearly someone didn't want something getting in. But breaking through this wall and we will find a corpse, a glued up mimic and a psychoscope, along with our first psychoscope specific chipset called Mimic Detection. Here we're introduced to yet another mechanic in this game, research. Just like System Shock 2 before it, enemies can be researched to make their strengths and weaknesses apparent to the player, as well as teaching you their psionic aptitude, meaning in order to unlock Typhon neuromod abilities, you need to actually acquire them by scanning the various enemies with the psychoscope. And whilst it initially might seem like something a little bit tedious or something, if you look at them through the psychoscope, it will actually mark them as well, like it does in Metal Gear 5 or Far Cry, so you've got a little marker above the enemy, so you know exactly where they are as they move about, so scanning them is only ever a benefit to the player. But yeah, when we head into the main lobby of Psychotronics, Alex will contact us again, saying that if we carry on, we're going to end up dying down here. So he's going to send us the code to a safe containing some more neuromods, and he kind of ushers us towards installing a Typhon ability. After all, he says, that's what this is all about, and we've spent the past 3 years looking for ways to put what they can do into us. On acquiring these neuromods, we'll then get a warning from January saying that Typhon neuromods are the reason we're all in this very mess. He'll also highlight that the station's defense turrets will start to see us as a threat since we contain Typhon material. And I remember originally that completely put me off installing Typhon neuromods as a result. I thought I'll stick with the turrets. I don't want turrets starting on me amongst everything else. But what I will say is, now that I know the game a bit more, whilst turrets are nice, they're not at all as useful as the Typhon abilities can be, for sure. January will, however, also warn that there might be other repercussions, which isn't ominous at all. The choice is really left up to the player as to what to install, though if you are wanting to hunt achievements, there are 3 tied to this. One is for no neuromods, one is for Typhon only neuromods, and one is for human only neuromods as well. And considering the different approaches each one of those playstyle offers, it is one heck of a replayable game. Not to mention, once you finish the game, you actually get access to New Game Plus, so you can keep all of your abilities. Once we proceed to scan the nearby contained phantoms to calibrate our psychoscope, we're granted entry into the main labs area, where we can see an old satellite contained in glass and a new type of creature floating around. And if we scan this creature, it reveals that it's called a Weaver, and there's some weird orange web-like material all around the area. Alex will chip in at this point and say that he's close to understanding what it is that they're building. And I'm gonna spoil it a little bit here, because it's a really great opportunity to highlight Prey's enemy mechanics. Unlike System Shock or System Shock 2 or even Bioshock, which kind of have a habit of arbitrarily respawning enemies, Prey actually does not respawn any enemies. Instead, as you are making progress throughout the main kind of Golden Path plotline, the station will become more and more dangerous and gets filled with newer and different types of Typhon enemies. And the way they've actually done this is that they've essentially created an entire ecology of the Typhon creatures, Mimics are basically the first form of Typhon, and like we saw at the start of the game, when they kill and kind of drain a human, they can multiply and split into more mimics. And then mimics can also kind of fuse together and metamorphosize into a weaver, and the weaver is responsible for repurposing and reanimating human corpses, turning them into phantoms, which explains why some of the phantoms still have human names. And there's various Typhon forms that are all made by various, combinations together of other enemies, like the Technopaths, who control technology, Telepaths, who mind control humans, and there's other forms as well, like the annoying explodey ball cystoids and their nests, along with a kind of final form at the end of the game. Funnily enough, the word Typhon refers to a serpentine giant who was one of the deadliest creatures in Greek mythology. And, with the wiry, kind of black, inky, slithery appearance of the Typhon, it certainly fits. But yeah, throughout your adventure, rather than enemies just respawning behind you or in the levels, nothing will ever respawn in the area that you're actually exploring. But return journeys can become progressively more challenging as the Typhon gradually take over the station and repurpose the corpses left behind. Continuing of our exploration of the Psychotronics department, one room I do really want to draw attention to is a room filled with sticky notes. A lot of the objects in this room are plastered with sticky notes that say "not a mimic," which really kind of shows the level of paranoia the staff were getting experimenting with the Typhon. And it also makes it a little bit easier for us as a player, because anything without a sticky notes becomes immediately suspect. And our suspicions can also be confirmed with a quick scan from our new psychoscope. In the adjoining room, there's also a couple of experiments that we can actually interact with. One introduces the idea of the Typhon lure. It's another grenade type item that'll attract Typhon towards it. And the other experiment is really quite fun to mess around with, as there's 3 apertures in the wall with 3 different items inside them, and you can press a button to open it up to a room where a mimic is trapped inside, so the mimic will then copy that item and take its appearance. But from the other side of the wall, you can actually replace the items in that area, so it's rather fun, watching the mimic transform into basically anything that you put into those sections. NoClip actually did a documentary on Prey, and there's some really funny and interesting notes about the mimic's abilities and what it was and is no longer able to turn into. So, well worth a watch or listen if you're interested. But yeah, later we come across an area called Live Experiment. Arguably they're less alive than expected, but here we get to allow a weaver near a corpse and witness firsthand the kind of phantom genesis as it transforms the corpse into a rather electrifying phantom, which is horrible in this close location. The electrical ones actually hurt you on contact when they're nearby. So yeah, after we take down that phantom, we can head into the morgue, and we'll actually learn from January that this isn't the first time that the Typhon have broke containment, and Morgan and Alex previously argued about cancelling the entire project, but Alex was convinced he was able to, sort it. So that's the part where Morgan implemented the January protocol, leading to where we are currently. Anyway, we leave the Psychotronics department and step foot into the guts. As we step into the guts tunnels to continue our journey, we're presented with a 0G tunnel. And January will actually contact us to tell us that these tunnels run the entire length of the station, providing power, air and water to the various sections of the station. So we've got this entire area serving as it kind of serves a functional in-universe purpose, a level essentially dedicated to the spaces between departments, or the space between the walls, as it were. January also says it's likely due to the minimal crew presence down here that Typhon's presence should also be at a minimum. But that's probably a bad assumption, he says. Thankfully, a majority of the Typhon forms we'll encounter down here are just cystoids who are easily dealt with because they're attracted to any motion whatsoever. So if you cease your momentum in 0G and just lob random junk at them, they will just chase after it and explode. Or if you've got the Huntress Boltcaster, you can fire a few foam darts at them. But yeah, eventually we'll be impacted by a kind of pulse of energy that disables his propulsion system temporarily, and January will call us again saying that the blast was from the magnetosphere, a system that stops the sun from cooking the station, like a kind of artificial ozone layer around the station or something. And he also decides to share a bit of humour with us, saying that hopefully it isn't breaking down. For your sake, I'll be fine. Which I've just always loved that little comment there. But yeah, sadly, the next door that we try to get through is actually going to be locked, and as luck would have it, the guy who has the keycard is in the magnetosphere control room. And I remember always feeling rather stressed at this section, because when you enter the magnetosphere room, you can see the device itself, which is this huge kind of spinning gear moving up and down a metal shaft, and periodically you get an audible warning saying imminent plasma discharge in 5, 4, 3. You know, you get the idea. So we actually have to head into the magnetosphere itself to find the corpse holding the keycard, whilst trying to time it right to avoid being cooked inside our suit. And it's just a real kind of test as to whether you've understood the zero-G controls at this point. But yeah, once we're successful, we'll leave the magnetosphere to be presented with a hell of a creepy scene, because as soon as we re-enter 0G and make our way back into the Guts tunnel, a technopath will ominously glide up to the window outside the station and just kind of loom at us there. Quite possibly hinting at why devices like the magnetosphere are on the fritz. We've got this new Typhon form to potentially deal with that can control the very technology that makes up most of the Talos 1 station. But yeah, moving onwards, we enter the cargo tunnel, where we can see a bunch of yellow strands that we saw earlier from the Weaver now spinning their way throughout the cargo tunnel. And as soon as we touch one of them, we're hit with some kind of flashback or memory. It says, not what you say they are. It's something that'll really make more sense once you finish the game and on repeat playthroughs, but we can see here that the station is really starting to fall to bits and the Typhon are spreading and evolving. Further in, we actually encounter our first Weaver that's not hidden behind glass down here. And it's interesting because the Weavers themselves tend to want to kind of be left to their own devices and not bothered. They'll just float around and continue constructing the yellow coral. But if you do attack them, they will spit cystoids at you. So, yeah. Further along the way to the Arboretum, we actually get a radio broadcast from Michaela announcing that the power plant is going critical. And the Chief of Security will respond as well, stating that they're hiding out in the cargo bay and everything's basically gone to pot. And at this point, it's really like an interesting switch of the dynamic from, say, System Shock, where every human on Citadel Station was already dead by the time the game starts. In Prey, there are still survivors, and you can interact with them in various ways. Some give you side quests or objectives, and some side quests can actually dictate the fates of a bunch of survivors. Stepping foot into the Arboretum, January tells us that there's access to deep storage from here, but also that the Arboretum is where Alex resides, his kind of palace at the top of the station. And the Arboretum is also where we'll be introduced to what I think is possibly the final mechanic in Prey, the Nightmare.
Morgan, are you alright? That Typhon, there's nothing in the research. Stay away from it.
The nightmare is a mechanic that had me on the edge of my seat on the very first time I played the game. At the time, I'd never played Resident Evil 3 or 7 or any of those games that have this kind of persistent, invulnerable enemy that hunts you down, but I'd definitely heard of them. So the nightmare to me felt like that kind of enemy. Now that I know a lot more about the game, the nightmare isn't actually invulnerable, but I didn't know that the first time I played, so instead I chose to hide away in whatever vent or security booth I could find until it buggered off. But yeah, the nightmare will now periodically appear to hunt you down when you enter a new section of the station. And I also recently discovered that installing Typhon Neuro mods also has a chance to cause the nightmare to appear to hunt. It's this huge hulking monstrosity of a phantom that makes some absolutely awful noises, so you definitely want to avoid this thing or take it down pretty quickly. And the fact that it can appear to interrupt your progress basically anywhere is just, well, terrifying, but also amazing. From this point onwards, the game really begins to open up. We get some new scenarios and side quests that open up here, there and everywhere. There are tons of areas that we can now explore, especially if we head towards deep storage. Eventually, you'll meet Morgan's ex-girlfriend. You'll also meet up with the bunch of survivors in the cargo bay, and even deal with an interstellar assassin and his operator hit crew that has been sent by your parents on Earth. And of course, we will deal with how to resolve the situation on Talos 1 before it's too late. But if you want to experience any of that, well, you'll just have to escape into Prey yourself. Before I end this episode, however, I want to highlight something that I missed out on all of this time up until like a couple of weeks ago. You can probably tell by the content of this episode just how much I absolutely adore Prey as a game and adore it as a world to escape into. However, Prey actually got a rather interesting piece of DLC that I had never actually played up until recently. It's called Mooncrash, and it tells the story of a Chasma prisoner in orbit around the moon, where TranStar have another research base, and we're also experimenting with neuromods. Chasma is kind of like a competitor to TranStar, often planting spies and such within their facilities, and they've just so happened to get their hands on an operator that contains all of the data from the Pythias moon base. So your job is to don a pair of looking glass goggles, essentially like hyper realistic immersive VR goggles, and run through simulations of the moon base as a variety of characters that are present there. Gradually, you uncover the story of what happened down on the moon whilst the events of the main game were taking place. So you start off reliving the life of Andrius Alenka, a prisoner who was undergoing kind of experimentation on at the moon base when it all went to hell, and he has access to some Typhon abilities. And I remember first time I played it, I thought he was going to be one of the weakest characters, seeing as the one you start off with, but thanks to his Typhon powers, he's actually really pretty strong. And as you progress through the simulation, you unlock a variety of mechanics. You get new characters to play as, and new challenges, because yes, this DLC actually introduces a kind of roguelite approach to the core mechanics of Prey. Your overall goal is to unlock each of the characters and attempt to escape with all 5 of them in a single run. But to do so, you absolutely need to become intimately familiar with the various escape methods and the actual layout of the moon base itself. One particular escape method, for example, requires a device to be repaired by Joan Winslow before being hacked by Claire Whitten, for it to then become usable for a third escapee. I think the one thing that put me off the DLC until now was that the whole experience essentially has a bit of a time limit, because periodically you've got this timer in the corner of the screen that'll start filling up as you play, and the simulation becomes more and more corrupted. each time the corruption level raises, it will respawn all of the enemies at a higher level. So a Phantom will become a Phantom 2, and some of them will be replaced by the more deadly variants like the etheric or thermal ones. But on my most recent playthrough, where I managed to actually complete Mooncrash, I learned that this essentially becomes a bit of a non-issue. Because throughout your runs you unlock various fabrication plans and you earn currency that allows you to pre-purchase items to take into runs in the future, which makes things a lot easier. And one of these items is called DailyLoop.time, and it's like this glowing hourglass thing that when you use it, it will actually roll back some of the progress bar leading to the next corruption level. So as you play the game more and more, you will get to a point where you can afford loads of these. by the time you're ready to do a full 5-person escape, you will be able to stockpile them. You can also find them around the map as well, or if you defeat some of the bigger Typhons like Technopaths and Weavers, they tend to drop those as well. But yeah, each character you play as in this DLC has their own storyline to follow, with certain prerequisites needing to be performed to unlock the actual storyline for a given character. And each of these storylines tells the tale of what happened leading up to and during the Typhon invasion. One story in particular potentially answers a long-standing question of how from the actual ending of the main game of Prey. And like any good roguelike, randomization is key. Prey Mooncrash handles this incredibly well. Like, entire sections of the moonbase might be without power on a given run, or they might be radiation hazards. The crater that you actually start in can end up covered in dust and lacking oxygen, so you have your mask over the entire time and you can barely see. Or a section of the base could be completely on fire, which is horrible. And you have to adapt to these various conditions that affect the moon base. You explore, you learn certain routes and shortcuts that might make your life earlier, learn how to use each of the playable characters' abilities to make it through in one piece, and damn is it rewarding. Like, my heart was absolutely beating in my chest the first time I approached my 5-character escape attempt. I planned everything out perfectly, I was rolling back the time constantly to keep the corruption level at a minimum, but all the while I knew that, like, if there's one enemy I haven't accounted for, or if something happens to be on fire and I have to find another way around, it could ruin the entire run. So it's definitely a thrill ride from start to finish. I managed to put 20 hours into the DLC alone, and there's still loads of objectives and achievements that I still have yet to get, so I'm definitely looking forward to visiting again in the future. So I highly recommend, if you do give Prey a play and you enjoy it, don't do what I did and sleep on Mooncrash. It is a fantastic experience. Prey is one of my favourite games of all time. It might even be my favourite game of all time, as it encompasses everything that I've kind of wanted in a game. It's first person, which I love for the immersion factor, and the entire game goes out of its way to present as believable of an environment as possible. Everything is considered, from where the occupants of Talos 1 or the Moonbase go to for food, recreation, showers, toilets, etc. Like every good immersive sim game, practically everything that isn't bolted down can be moved around. Computers are interactable with unique functionality, and there's so many mechanics that just cross over one another and interact in interesting ways. The whole premise of the game feels entirely believable as well, with the Typhon feeling like a threat that is gradually invading and taking over the station rather than just some arbitrary enemy that's appeared out of nowhere. So if you need a game to thoroughly escape into, you honestly can't do much better than Prey. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. I really enjoyed putting together this episode and talking about one of my favourite games. I'm still trying to get into my groove when it comes to what subjects to talk about, and I've found that Prey makes it rather easy to just go on and on and on with its constant, steady introduction of new mechanics and challenges that all connect with one another. And now I'm just kind of left wondering if this level of depth is something that I'll be able to maintain with other games that we cover on this show, or whether it's even something people want to listen to. I don't know if going this deep into games going forwards will even work with a weekly schedule as well, because this episode took me so long to go through. Like, originally I was doing it from memory, and then it became a case of, well, to do it justice, I kind of need to play the game and make sure I'm getting all this right. So I was actually replaying the game whilst taking notes and everything. So it took a lot longer to put together than I originally expected. So please do let me know your thoughts. Do you prefer these longer episodes going a bit more in-depth on mechanics and how they affect the player and how it makes you feel and stuff? Or do you prefer more of the shorter form stuff like the Animal Crossing one? Do let me know in the comments on Discord, YouTube or Patreon. But yeah, it's still early days for the podcast, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot more experimentation in the future. But overall, I do hope that you enjoyed this episode, and if you've been on the fence about Prey, do consider giving it a shot sometime. It's quite often on sale on Steam and GOG, usually for pretty cheap, like, £3-4 quid, something like that. In terms of plans for the future, I am planning on an upcoming episode to feature our first guest on the podcast, Bee Technician, so please do look forward to that. And if you do enjoy these episodes, consider supporting the podcast on Patreon for early access to upcoming episodes and exclusive posts. Your support really does help me keep the podcast ad-free and pays for the distribution costs to the various podcasting platforms. But regardless of any of that, I hope you have yourself a cracking weekend, and please join us next time for episode 7, A Cold and Endless Night.